The following words are from a statement of support signed by close to 3,000 scientists and academics. We, the Understein, call on governments around the world to adopt and implement a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty as a matter of urgency to protect the lives and livelihoods of present and future generations through a global, equitable phase-out of fossil fuels in line with the scientific consensus not to exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. In addition to climate impacts, new research shows that the air pollution caused by fossil fuels was responsible for almost 1 in 5 deaths worldwide in 2018. These significant health and environmental impacts are derived from extracting, refining, transporting, and burning of fossil fuels and are often borne by vulnerable and marginalized communities. At the same time, centralized fossil fuel generated energy often concentrates power and wealth into the hands of a select few, bypassing the communities in which extraction occurs. The current dominant approach to tackling climate change focuses on policies that restrict greenhouse gas emissions and the demand for fossil fuels, for example, by fostering the growth of substitutes for fossil fuels, such as renewable energy and electric vehicles. But there has been limited focus on policies aimed at constraining the production and supply of fossil fuels at the source. Yet efforts to reduce demand for fossil fuels will be undermined if supply continues to grow. Continued production means either that fossil fuels will continue to be burnt for energy, pushing the world towards catastrophic global warming, or that the industry and countries reliant on fossil fuels will face massive stranded assets. Revenue streams currently relied on for development and public sector employment and essential public services evaporate. And I want to add to that, there are more and more banks that are refusing to fund more research, more digging in the ground and offshore drilling and all that stuff. And that's something to be looking forward to, that more banks do that and push all your companies, all your banks, all your schools who have retirement funds, get them out of fossil fuels.
When I was young, I remember my dad had a love of trees. Well, maybe an interest, definitely an interest in trees. One day he came home with one, a little one, about 4 or 5 feet tall, a little ball of dirt at the base. I was only about 8 at the time, and I had never seen anyone walking around with a tree in their hand. I said, "Where'd you get that?" And he said, "I found it on the side of the road. It was going to get run over by a truck, so we planted it in the corner of our yard." When we were in high school, we moved to the far side of town. We were now living on the edge of Pilcher Park, the largest forest preserve in Will County. The peace, the quiet, the beauty, and the scale of it all were quite a contrast to the rest of my world, which was really a very conventional suburban upbringing. But there was TV and TV news, and even though I did not watch the news, I knew what was on. It was the 60s. And that was a very real and not just another TV show. I went to college at Southern Illinois University, and again, lived on the edge of another forest, this time the Shawnee National Forest. But mostly what I was doing in college was hiding from the Vietnam War. Something my dad, who had been a Marine sergeant in World War II, did not mind. He did not trust that the people up top were acting in our best interest on this one. I'd had a long and happy marriage of 38 years. We have 2 beautiful daughters, one of whom I live with now, along with one of my 2 equally wonderful son-in-laws and 3 wonderful grandchildren. But life ended early for my wife, Linda. She passed away at age 58. It was June 14th, just 3 weeks before the birth of our first grandchild. Left adrift in what was to me an almost empty world, I spent my time, which suddenly there was a lot of, helping take care of my new grandchild. Eventually there were 3, and the family moved to Geneva, and I moved with them. It was one day, walking the youngest of this bunch out of the library, that I noticed the church, this church. And I thought I should go over there sometime and meet some people, talk to some adults. This was to be a novelty in my life at the time, to talk to people outside my own immediate family. I had no idea what the folks inside would be like, but I went in anyway. And here I am today, talking to everybody all at once. It's a little overwhelming. But I would never have had this opportunity to speak unless it was about something worthwhile. Not incidentally, this is my life's pursuit, to find something worthwhile. Maybe something from my father in the chaos of the 60s. I resisted any counsel from above. I refused to pursue a career. I wanted to see the world from an unentangled point of view. Not that I was very good at this. I drifted in the wilderness, metaphorically, for over 40 years. I was, as is our way, promptly directed to join a group to find out what is going on. Me and my trees, we picked the environmental group, Green Sanctuary. Contemplating the vastness of the environmental problems, I noticed this climate change thing kept coming up, and I became curious as to why is that still a thing. The more I look, the bigger it became. But the most important thing about it is that those that have the least to do with it will be harmed the most, while those who benefit the most, caused most of the problem, will suffer the least. Well, except for those living in fire and flood zones, getting a taste of the future already. But we don't have that around here. We have no melting polar bears here. We live with environmental privilege. And being desirous of promoting practical goodness in the world, I wanted to do something about the climate change, but I didn't know how. Here at our church, I was invited to join the League of Women Voters. I could have spent 100 years planning my life, and I would never have seen that coming. Turns out they had an unused seat at the table. This is the climate table, a large group of all of the groups in Illinois working on the environment. I had never heard of it, but it was through that seat that our church, including all of us, have a voice on the largest environmental issues in the state. And today, we have an even larger project at hand. Today, we're here to celebrate our church signing a resolution calling for the creation of the fossil fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, a treaty to be created by the United Nations. I think this is about as big a deal as you can get. I would be remiss not to remind everyone that this is not as abstract as it may seem. It turns out that we are part of the fossil fuel industry because we own a coal plant, at least everyone who lives in any one of our 3 cities. Today's service is a first step in what will lead us into a much larger journey that we shall soon be on. Our goal should be nothing less than to end the limitless use of fossil fuels and the wars that they entail. Who will build the next gas pipeline to Europe? Will it be Joe Manchin or will it be Vladimir Putin? The poor Ukrainians are caught in the middle of that. And our desire for and use of fossil fuels contribute to this situation. As long as we have a fossil fuel society built on a fossil fuel economy, we will have pollution, wars, and climate change. So I'm here speaking today on behalf of all of our children and grandchildren to come. Hopefully, we will not let them down. Thank you for letting me stand up here in front of you all and speak with us today.
These words were released by the Vatican. Pope Francis again joined scientists in holding to the Paris Agreement's temperature increase goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius. The planet is already 1.2 degrees hotter, yet new fossil fuel projects every day accelerate our race towards the precipice. Enough is enough. All new exploration and production of coal, oil, and gas must immediately end, and existing production of fossil fuels must be urgently phased out. This must be just transition for impacted workers into environmentally sound alternatives. The proposed fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty holds great promise to complement and enhance the Paris Agreement.
I'm Lynn Steele, and I am going to quote what Miss Berman, whom we saw in the TED Talk earlier said in the conclusion of that lecture, she said the following: I had a conversation with my grandmother once when I was out of hope, feeling overwhelmed. And she said to me, "Do you understand how much the world has changed in my lifetime?" She said, "When your mother was growing up, we didn't have cell phones or computers. We had a phone on the wall and it was a party line. And if it rang twice, it was for us." She said, "I didn't know anyone who'd ever been on a plane." And she told me that the world has entirely changed in her lifetime. She said, how we travel, how we communicate, and it will be in yours as well. So when I do this work every day for Fossil Fuel Treaty, I'm holding on to the idea that one day I'm going to be sitting with my grandchildren, and I'm going to be telling them about this time in our history when we clawed at the last primary forest to get at the oil. This crazy time in our history when we used to fill our cars with gas, heat our homes with gas. And they will barely believe me because the world will be such a different place. I was thankful that she ended with a good note.
If you've heard me say this before, I do hope you'll forgive me. This is one of my favorite, I guess you could say, stumps to stand on. But maybe it's worth being clear, so let me do that now. Climate change is the #1 challenge facing humanity today. It's bigger than holding people accountable for mishandling classified documents, or inciting insurrection or fraud. It's bigger than racism. It's bigger than the death of democracy. It is bigger than justice or the search for truth and meaning. The challenge of climate change is bigger than any problem that has ever faced humanity in the history of our species. Because if we don't get this one thing right, none of that other stuff matters. It's worth repeating that. None of it will matter if we don't get this right. And if I'm being honest, I will confess that it is difficult to not be frightened. Staring oblivion in the face is scary stuff. The sheer scope of the problem, the massive scale on which work is needed, it'll make the eyes drift, the gaze wander. And the next thing we know, we're back to the mundane, the prosaic, and common, everyday, manageable challenges. And there are a lot of those. The challenge before us for today is to not solve everything. It's simply this: to not look away. Actions like this climate treaty are small things. By itself, our endorsement is not going to solve anything. It'll change nothing. But what I want you to hear in this step that we have decided to collectively take, and in the countless other little steps happening all over our country and over our world, is the sound of change. We've been talking about climate change for a good while now, but today it feels different. We can feel something different. We can feel the change starting to happen around us. There's an energy today, a buzzing in the air, a trembling in the ground. This That was not there when Al Gore first talked about his inconvenient truth. Today is different. We are different. And that thing, that feeling, that truth, that gives me hope. I have faith we will make the future a future that is for all of us, a future where we can live and thrive here on this pale blue dot, our blue boat sailing on the sea of the Milky Way. And I have faith in the ingenuity of humanity. I believe in the power of human minds, human hearts, and human hands. I trust that salvation, if any is going to be on offer, will come from us, from all of us, working together now and into our ever more collective future. May we be resolved to live, work, and love for that future that lifts us all, that grows us all, and makes space for us all. So may it be so, and amen. And Jeff, if you'd pull the images up, this is the website where we go to sign the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. Organizations all over and people all over the world have been signing. This is a really cool thing that's happening. And the other day, to catch these screenshots so that we could show them to you, we filled this out. This is the form that we would fill out. And as you can see, we would put our information into it, and we did. And then we hit that button down at the bottom. And that tells the world that we are paying attention, that we are engaged, that we're listening. It's a small step, but it is a step, and one I hope will be heard. So thank you again to the Green Sanctuary team for their leadership on this, for their work on these issues, and for giving us the opportunity to pay attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Scott. When I first found that page on the website, I was quite excited. It was about a year ago. And if we weren't working in church time, as we obviously are and must, we could have signed it then, but one of the very first Unitarian churches ever. I still think there may be only a half a dozen in the whole country that have signed this yet. So we're becoming national leaders right here in our own little town. Awesome.